You can buy this spaceship with just 46 of these. Yeah, there might be a problem with Starfield's economy. Starfield's looking incredible, but there are one or two things people are skeptical about. In this video, we're going to be looking at the most major concerns and being all negative. The first concern people have is with the unbalanced economy because, right now it's kind of looking like you can buy a spaceship with the equivalent of 46 burgers. But is this concern legit or is it all overblown and really we have nothing to worry about? Let's break it down and look at it from an honest, unbiased perspective. One patty melt costs 295 credits. 295 times 46 is 13,570, which is enough for this, a 3-star Narcissus spaceship, which is 13,460. Now, that can't be right, surely. A spaceship shouldn't cost 46 sandwiches. Unless, like meat and bread is just incredibly rare in the future. To put things in a contemporary setting, if you wanted to buy a standard Cessna aircraft for $85,000 these days, that's going to cost you 8,500 $10 cheeseburgers, a whole lot more than the 46 burgers it costs you in Starfield. So at first it's looking like, there might be a problem with Starfield's economy, which is bad because, money has to mean something, it has to have a value, otherwise where's the grind and where's the drive to improve? But here's why there probably isn't anything to worry about. For starters, based on what we've seen, everything is in proportion. Better spaceships are obviously going to cost you more money, or in sandwich terms, thousands of sandwiches. For example, the Celestial 2 costs the equivalent of 1,326 patty melts, while the Voyager 3 will set you back 2,224 patty melts. So really, you will have to work to get your hands on the good spaceships. You can't just fork over a few hundred space credits. Also, if a ship is cheap to start off with, you'll still need to upgrade it. This requires parts and parts cost money. The bridge component of this Demos ship, for example, is about 45,700 by itself. So going from a rusty tin can to a fully functioning upgraded spaceship is gonna cost you a whole lot of money. Starfield's economy isn't as bad as we first thought. It's worth clarifying what screen we're looking at here. This is the vendor screen, which shows you what ships you can buy and sell. If it says unregistered, that means you don't own it. If it says registered, that means you own it. And this tells us quite a lot about the economy, so ships you don't own cost a lot more. For example, the Dragonfire is not registered to you, and the listed value is a massive 368,325. Contrast that with the Claymore, which is registered to you, and that's only 39,327. This suggests that when you sell ships, you'll get roughly 10% of the value. That's pretty par for the course with Bethesda games. Elder Scrolls and Fallout merchants always rip you off and give you 10% of the value or thereabouts, unless, you're maxed out on speech and bartering. So the number we see here isn't the ship's actual worth, just how much you can sell it for based on your current skills. Upgrade those skills and you'll see the ship's value rise. So what first looked like a concern with the Starfield economy and how unbalanced it was, it isn't really all that concerning. The majority of ships are vastly more expensive, upgrading parts will cost more, and leveling up your barter skill will make money go further. Another concern people have is with repeating content. Most sandbox games have quests that repeat themselves. For example, go here, take out this thing, then come back and get a reward. And the danger with Starfield is, because it's on a much, much bigger scale, surely we'll see a higher number of these repeating quests. Well, the first thing to know is that Starfield has about 250,000 lines of dialogue. This is a ridiculous number. This is compared to 111,000 in Fallout 4 and 60,000 in Skyrim. So it's got more lines of dialogue than Fallout 4 and Skyrim combined. To put that in perspective, if you read 685 lines of dialogue every day, it would take you a year to hear it all. One Redditor actually did the maths and wrote that if the lines of dialogue averaged 5 words each, that's 1.25 million words total in Starfield. So you're getting 3,400 words each each day for a year. That's a lot of dialogue. Added to that, Todd Howard said that before accepting any mission, we'd know whether we'd be in for a unique experience or something generated by the game. So you should be able to steer clear of any procedural stuff to avoid much repetition. Fuel is a valid concern a lot of people have with Starfield. What if you run out of fuel? Well, there's a bit of miscommunication here. So while your ship does have fuel, this will never run out during a flight and leave you stranded. Instead, fuel is used merely as a meter that determines whether you can reach your destination. If you don't have enough fuel, the game won't let you fly there. Here's what Howard had to say about that.
We've recently changed it where the fuel in your ship and the grav drive limits how far you could go at once, but it doesn't run out of fuel.
So yeah, you'll never actually be in a position in Starfield where you get stranded. Fuel is not an issue. Land vehicles are something people are worried about in Starfield, or to be more specific, the lack of them. The devs haven't shown off any land vehicles in Starfield so far, suggesting that there aren't any. With the massive distances you can travel in Starfield, it surely means navigating planets on foot is going to take absolutely ages. Well, in my opinion, I'm not too worried about the lack of land vehicles. For starters, we have a jetpack, and that's going to be a lot more maneuverable than, say, a bike that can't get over a little ledge, or a rover that would probably get stuck on a rock. Whenever I play No Man's Sky, I just tend to use the jetpack anyway, just to get around. Also, I've got a feeling everything in Starfield is going to be at arm's reach anyway. Resources like rocks and plants are always going to be somewhat near you. It's not like there's going to be a single rare flower growing on the peak of an inaccessible mountain. So I don't think you're ever going to need to hop in a ground vehicle and traverse a massive distance to find something. And if you did want to get to the other side of the planet just to, have a look around, you can always get in your ship and fly there. Of course, a huge garage of bikes and rovers and mechs would be nice, but them not being in the game won't make it worse. And I'm sure Bethesda has built planets around the fact that there are no land vehicles. The next concern, Starfield runs at just 30 FPS on Xbox. Now, I will say this is not ideal. If you've played a game at 60 frames per second, going down to 30 takes some getting used to. It feels like watching the game through some kind of filter, to me anyway, but it's a necessary trade-off in order to have the sort of interactivity and fidelity in Starfield. Something has to be toned down, and in this case, it's the frame rates. Having a low frame rate means objects have permanence. In other words, we can leave an object in one place, fly around the galaxy, and come back, and it will still be there. It means you can pick up any loose object in the game and manipulate it. It means everything is affected by physics and looks and moves exactly as you'd expect. Howard has also said they're using techniques to make you forget you're playing at 30 FPS. Telling kind of funny games, we're feeling really great, the game feels great in your hands. There are things you can do to make the game look and feel great, things like motion blur, how fast the game refreshes or reacts to a controller input. All of those things matter in something feeling great. And I can honestly say this is the best feeling game that we've had. Onto animation now, and this is a valid concern because, well, look at this. This is not great animation. Now, Bethesda make great games, but they're hardly known for convincing animation. We just tend to look past it because the world is so massive and detailed and great to explore, but to put it plainly, the animation sucks compared to something like GTA or Assassin's Creed. And animation doesn't really look to be that much improved in Starfield. Despite being on a new engine and taking advantage of all new hardware, we're still seeing those same stiff, robotic NPCs. I mean, think about it, in all of the Starfield gameplay we've seen so far, how many times have we actually seen an NPC cycle through animations? Not many. They're either already sitting down, already standing up, or already walking in a straight line. So it kind of seems like they're hiding the animations. And let me just say, the animations look fine on their own, so like when when you're fighting, for instance, that looks pretty convincing. It's the blending between two different animations that's the problem. So an NPC simply transitioning from standing to sitting down at a table, or even just walking forwards and turning their head to look at you, just looks weird. So yeah, animation concerns are valid in my opinion. Monetization. This has a few people worried, especially as we already know about the game's first piece of DLC before Starfield is even out. It's called Shattered Space, and it comes as part as the Constellation Edition. This is something we've all just gotten used to now. Recently, Mortal Kombat 1 advertised its first fighter pack before the game is even out. Not too long ago, people would be saying, just put them in the game. Don't hold them back and then charge us extra. But that's just how the game industry is now, so Starfield isn't unusual in that regard. It's not uncommon for a separate team of devs to work on DLC while the main team is working on the main game. This means the DLC can come out while the game is still fresh and basically sell more. I'm not saying it's great, but also it stops there being a massive delay in DLC. For reference, Fallout 3 came out in October 2008, and its first DLC, Operation Anchorage, launched just 3 months later in January 2009. So I'm not too concerned with the DLC being advertised before the game is out. But what's more problematic is the advertising of this, the Constellation skin pack. It suggests Bethesda could fill up a digital marketplace with microtransactions ranging from new outfits to new weapon skins and spaceship paint jobs, kind of like we've seen in most modern RPGs, from Diablo to Assassin's Creed. If there's one purchasable skin pack, there's probably more coming, so I'm fully braced to see a Starfield marketplace filled with microtransactions. But will this ruin the game? Honestly, not really for me. So for starters, it's a single player game, so it doesn't really affect anyone else if you buy it or not. Plus, Starfield will have loads of content already, so I doubt it will feel like you're missing out by not grabbing one or two optional extras. I don't think it's a case of Bethesda carving their game into pieces and selling it to you bit by bit. Okay, the next concern people have is with protagonists not being voiced. That is to say, you play a completely silent character. Now let's see if that's a problem. Well, firstly, having a silent character is hardly a first for Bethesda. You play one in the Elder Scrolls series, and in these games, the lack of voice acting for your character doesn't affect the quality of the games at all. The same in the Zelda games. Removing your character's voice lets you project your own voice onto them, immersing you more into the character. If your character were to suddenly have a voice, they just wouldn't feel like an extension of you, but their own character entirely. That's not a bad thing in itself. Assassin's Creed, The Witcher, and Subnautica are all open world RPGs with fully voiced characters, and they feel just as immersive. It's more that in Bethesda games, you are the character, and in other games, you are simply controlling them. The downside, of course, with having no voice acting for your main character is a suspension of disbelief, because whoever you're talking to is just having a one-sided conversation. Everyone in the game is almost like it's like they're pretending. It's not weird that you're just going around not speaking. But at the end of the day, you do have dialogue in Bethesda games. You're still answering them and engaging them in conversation. It's just that their replies are out loud and your replies are in your head. So it's not as weird as, say, Pokemon, where your character not only has no voice acting, but 0 lines of dialogue as well. One Pokemon game even pointed this out. In Pokemon Gold, in the final battle, you actually encounter the player you played in the previous Pokemon game. When you try and speak to them, they actually say nothing because, of course, your character in that game didn't speak. I love that moment, but that said, I do prefer the way Starfield does it, where your character has dialogue but doesn't say it out loud, and this lets you give your character whatever voice you want to project on them. So yeah, no voice acting for your character, not a big concern. So those were all the biggest concerns people have with Starfield. Some legit worries in there, but for me, most of them aren't going to be major problems. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and for more Starfield videos, subscribe to the channel.